rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor echoed through the sterile silence, bouncing off the stark white walls of the hospital room. A dim bedside lamp cast faint flickering shadows on the ceiling, shifting gently with each shallow breath. Isla Carter drifted in and out of consciousness, trapped in a limbo where reality bled into an endless void. Her mind was hazy, her senses dulled, wrapped in a strange, weightless numbness. She tried to open her eyes, but her lids were impossibly heavy, as if something was anchoring them shut. A dull, throbbing pain pulsed through her skull, spreading to her numb limbs. Isla attempted to move, only to find her body unresponsive, as if she had been lying still for an eternity. A soft breeze drifted in from a slightly open window, carrying the delicate scent of flowers, but it did nothing to quell the eerie emptiness swirling inside her. She took a slow, shaky breath, trying to grasp onto something, anything, but there was nothing. Just a vast, blank space where her memories should have been. No images, no recollections, no names. Panic crept into her chest, wrapping around her lungs like an iron grip. She clutched the hospital sheets with trembling fingers, trying to anchor herself. Who am I? Why am I here? The door suddenly creaked open. A tall figure stepped inside. The man was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that fit his strong frame with effortless precision. His footsteps were deliberate, steady, exuding an air of quiet dominance. His face, sharp as if sculpted from marble, was breathtakingly perfect, yet unnervingly void of life, like a statue with eyes that saw too much. His eyes, an icy shade of blue, were deep and unreadable, hiding secrets beneath their frozen depths. But what unsettled Isla most wasn't his striking appearance. It was his gaze. Cold, distant, completely devoid of emotion. He regarded her with the same detachment one might have for an object rather than a person. And then, in a deep, measured voice, he spoke. "You're awake." There was no relief, no affection, no concern in his tone, only an unsettling calmness, controlled and unfeeling. Isla tried to speak, but her throat was dry and parched. It took several moments before she could whisper the only question echoing in her mind. "Who are you?" A silence stretched between them. His eyes flickered, as if something stirred within him, but it was gone in an instant. His expression returned to its unnerving neutrality. And then he finally answered, "I'm your husband." A wave of cold terror washed over Isla. Husband? No, that wasn't possible. She couldn't even remember her own name. How could she possibly believe she was married to a man who felt like a stranger? The car glided smoothly along the cobblestone road, flanked by towering trees whose shadows stretched long under the fading sunlight. The golden hues of dusk bathed the world in a dreamlike glow, yet Isla felt no warmth from it. Seated in the back, she watched the scenery blur past the window, but nothing sparked even the faintest sense of familiarity. Beside her, Nikolai Laurent remained silent. One hand rested casually on the steering wheel, his sharp gaze fixed ahead, unreadable as ever. He never glanced her way, never spoke a word. The silence was suffocating, thick with unspoken tension. As the car slowed to a halt, Isla held her breath. Before her stood Ravenshire Manor, a colossal estate, grand and imposing, with towering stone walls, arched windows, and intricately carved columns. A place that could have belonged to royalty. Isla stepped out of the car, her gaze trailing up the vast mansion. It was breathtaking in its perfection, too perfect, yet it felt empty, soulless, cold. Crossing the threshold, she stepped into the grand foyer. The glow of the crystal chandeliers was too bright, casting long, unnatural shadows that seemed to stretch toward her. The air smelled of polished wood and something colder. Emptiness. But this wasn't a home. There were no wedding photos lining the walls. No personal belongings. No trace of a life shared within these walls. A row of servants stood in formation along the corridor, their postures stiff, their expressions unreadable. Not one of them smiled. Not one of them welcomed her back. Not one of them met her eyes. The unease settled deep in Isla's bones. A middle-aged woman, likely the housekeeper, stepped forward, her voice polite yet strangely strained. "Welcome home, madam." The words made Isla stiffen. Madam? It felt foreign, unfamiliar, like a title that belonged to someone else, a name spoken in a play she didn't remember starring in. She turned to Nikolai, hoping for reassurance, but he merely gave a curt nod, then walked away, disappearing into the vastness of the mansion without another word. Leaving her standing there, alone. Was this really her home? The air inside Ravenshire Manor was thick with an unshakable sense of emptiness. Isla wandered through its endless hallways, yet every room, every corridor felt soulless, like spaces never truly lived in. Nothing here felt like it belonged to her. There were no clothes in the wardrobe that carried a familiar scent, no notebooks or sketches that hinted at her past. No trace of a life she supposedly shared within these walls. Each passing day only deepened her unease. Nikolai remained distant, his responses evasive, his presence fleeting. Everything changed the moment Isla found the locked drawer in the library. She pulled at it, it wouldn't budge. Why was a drawer inside her own home locked? Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on a small ring of keys hanging discreetly on a bookshelf. Glancing around to make sure she was alone, she quickly grabbed one and tested it. Click. The drawer slid open. Inside lay a stack of documents, but what caught her attention first was a thick, official-looking paper stamped with a legal seal. A divorce agreement. Isla's breath hitched as she pulled out the document, her pulse hammering. Her eyes locked onto the printed words. Party A, Isla Carter. Then lower. Her own signature inked in steady, deliberate strokes, as if she had meant it. Her hands trembled. She had wanted a divorce? Why had Nikolai never mentioned this? It felt as if she was reading about someone else's life, a version of herself she no longer remembered. She couldn't live in this darkness any longer. She needed answers. With unsteady fingers, Isla reached for her phone and scrolled through her contacts. Most of the names meant nothing to her, but then one name made her heart clench. Camille Evans. She didn't remember who Camille was, but something inside her whispered that this woman held the key to her past. She pressed the call button. After a few rings, a hesitant voice answered. "Hello, who is this?" Isla took a deep breath. She wasn't sure what to say, but finally, she whispered, "Camille, it's me." Isla. A long silence. Then Camille's voice trembled with disbelief. "Ian? Oh my God, you're alive?" A cold shiver ran down Isla's spine. She hadn't just lost her memory. She had disappeared from everyone's life. Isla's grip tightened around the phone. She couldn't let this moment slip away. "Camille, it's really me. I need your help." A sharp inhale echoed through the line. Camille was still in shock, but when she spoke again, her voice was laced with concern. "Isla, do you even know how long you've been missing?" Isla frowned. "Missing?" Before she could respond, Camille continued, her tone dark. "Everyone thought you were dead. You vanished right after you told me you had proof that you were innocent." Isla's heartbeat pounded violently. "Innocent of what? What are you talking about?" Isla's voice shook. A long pause, then Camille whispered, "Vivienne Moreau destroyed your marriage?" The name sliced through Isla's mind like a blade, a stranger's name, yet it sent a shiver down her spine. Who is she? Nikolai Zek. Everything started falling into place. Vivienne had returned after Nikolai's marriage. She had orchestrated a trap, fabricating fake evidence, false messages, all designed to make Nikolai believe that Isla had betrayed him. And he believed it. Camille's voice was edged with bitterness. A sharp pain twisted in Isla's chest. Nikolai had never questioned it, never given her a chance to explain. He had condemned her without hesitation. But the worst part was yet to come. Camille took a shaky breath before adding, "You figured out the truth, and the moment you were about to meet me to expose everything, you had your accident." A cold chill ran down Isla's spine. That accident? It wasn't an accident. Someone had wanted her gone, and there was only one person who had the motive: Vivienne Moreau. Isla had no other choice. She had to confront the truth, and more importantly, she had to make Nikolai face it too. She might not remember Vivienne Moreau, but she knew one thing for certain: someone had wanted her gone. And now she had proof. Her chance came sooner than expected: a charity gala hosted by Nikolai himself. Isla knew that whoever was behind everything would be there. That evening, as she stepped into the grand ballroom, a hush fell over the crowd. They had thought she was gone forever. They were wrong. Among the hundreds of faces in the room, Isla searched for a reaction, a sign of guilt, a flicker of fear. And then she saw a blonde woman in a striking red gown, standing beside Nikolai. The woman froze the moment she saw Isla. Isla didn't recognize her, but she recognized Isla. Taking a steady breath, Isla walked forward, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She didn't know who this woman was, but her reaction had already exposed her. "You know who I am, don't you?" Isla's voice was calm, yet razor sharp. The woman composed herself quickly, forcing a polite smile. "I'm afraid you're mistaken. I don't know you." But Isla was ready. She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen, revealing the fabricated messages Camille had found, all sent to Nikolai, accusing Isla of betrayal. "These messages came from your number," Isla stated, her voice unwavering. A ripple of tension spread through the room. Whispers filled the space. Nikolai's eyes were locked onto the screen. The woman, Vivienne, tightened her grip on her wineglass. "You have no proof that I sent them," Vivienne scoffed. Without a word, Isla placed a stack of documents onto a nearby table. Bank records, proving Vivienne had paid someone to fabricate the evidence. Vivienne's mask cracked. This is ridiculous," she snapped. But Isla wasn't done. Reaching into her purse, she pulled out the final piece of evidence: a recording Camille had recovered from an anonymous source. Vivienne's own voice echoed through the silent room. "You don't need to kill her. Just make sure she disappears for a while. Nikolai will come back to me. He always does." Nikolai went rigid. Vivienne turned pale. "You recorded me?" she shrieked, her voice piercing through the air. But Isla only turned to Nikolai. "You still believe her, Nikolai?" Nikolai was speechless. His fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. His eyes remained fixed on the documents, on the phone screen, on the undeniable truth before him. Vivienne looked at him, desperate. "Nikolai, you can't believe her. Everything I did for you." But Nikolai wasn't listening anymore. His gaze was locked on Isla, the woman he had once loved with everything he had, the same woman he had cast aside without a second thought. She wasn't pleading, she wasn't crying, she was simply empty. The silence between them was too vast, too unforgiving. Security dragged Vivienne away, her shrill screams echoing across the ballroom. But Isla no longer cared. She turned away. She had cleared her name, she had proven her innocence, but did it even matter anymore? "Isla, wait!" Nikolai's voice broke through the air. His hand closed around her wrist. She stopped, but she didn't turn back. "I was wrong." His voice was raw. "I was wrong about everything." Isla took a deep breath. She had waited so long to hear those words. But now, they meant nothing. "If you loved me," Isla's voice was quiet, yet it cut deeper than any betrayal. "Then why was I never enough for you to believe in?" Nikolai had no answer. She pulled her hand free from his grasp, gently yet firmly, and then she walked away, without looking back. This time, she was the one leaving him behind. Nikolai couldn't forget the moment Isla walked away. In the days that followed, Ravenshire Manor felt empty, cold, just like his heart. He hadn't lost her because she wanted to leave. He lost her because he never fought to make her stay. He sought out Camille, Isla's closest friend, but her words cut deeper than he expected. "You could have believed in her, Nikolai, but you didn't." She was right. Meanwhile, Isla left England and moved to Venice, a place untouched by memories of the man who had broken her heart. She took a job at a small publishing house, built a quiet life, and learned to love herself again. She told herself she was fine, that she had moved on. But on silent nights, when the moon reflected off the canals, there was always an ache in her chest. 3 months passed, and Nikolai realized success meant nothing without Isla by his side. He couldn't change the past, but he could do something he had failed to do before: fight to win her back. So he went to Venice. Not to beg for forgiveness, not to demand her love, but to prove that this time he would never let her go again. Isla. She froze at the sound of his voice. Slowly she turned, and there he was. Nikolai. But he was no longer the man she once knew. His blue eyes weren't cold anymore. They held regret, pain, and something deeper: hope. He had come for her. I lost you once. His voice was raw, unsteady. I can't lose you again. Isla studied him for a long moment. She had learned to live without him, but had she ever truly been happy? We can't go back to what we were, Nikolai, she said softly. He didn't look disappointed. Instead, a slow smile curved his lips. Then let's write a new story. No more secrets, no more doubts, only two souls learning to love again, the right way this time. From that day on, Nikolai didn't leave. He pursued Isla all over again. Not with empty promises or wealth, but with small, sincere actions. He showed up at the cafe where she worked, quietly sipping espresso at a nearby table. He sent her handwritten letters, not begging for forgiveness, but simply sharing thoughts he had never been brave enough to say before. He wasn't impatient. He waited, giving Isla time, letting her see that this time he wasn't trying to make amends for his guilt. He truly wanted her in his life. The letters turned into small conversations. The conversations turned into long walks along the canals of Venice. Slowly, Isla stopped seeing Nikolai as a painful part of her past. He had changed, and so had she. One evening, beneath the soft glow of the streetlights, Nikolai finally asked, "If I asked you to marry me again, would you even consider it?" Isla hesitated. "I don't know, Nikolai." She looked at him, searching. "If I say yes, will you ever doubt me again?" Isla held his gaze for a long moment. She knew now. Their love had never disappeared. It had simply lain dormant, waiting to be awakened. She didn't hesitate. "I would." 3 months later, at a villa overlooking Lake Como, Isla walked down an aisle of white roses toward the man she had fallen in love with twice. This time, there were no lies, no pain, only love, deeper, stronger, and unbreakable. Nikolai took her hands in his blue eyes filled with nothing but devotion. "I promise I will never lose you again." Isla smiled, her heart full. "And I promise I will always trust you." Two souls, once torn apart by doubt and deception, had found their way back to each other. This time, they would write a perfect ending. And their love was reborn.